All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Connecticut's Old State House. My name is Mariana Garcia, and I am the Public Programs Manager here at the Old State House. I want to thank you all for joining us today for our program. Let me draw you a picture, a conversation with editorial cartoonist Bob Englehart. This program was planned to accompany our current exhibit, which is on display just across the hall. That exhibit is entitled Running for Office, Candidates, Campaigns, and the Cartoons of Clifford Berryman. And it will be on display here at the Old State House through November 13th. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, I highly suggest that you do right after the program. Clifford Berryman, he was a very famous cartoonist towards the early 20th century. And now we're going to talk about a very modern cartoonist that has been active for the last couple of decades. So this program is also part of our Go Big, Vote Local initiative. So little things like just one vote can have a big impact on an election. So Connecticut's Old State House is bringing you a season full of little things like cartoons to help you be inspired to help make a big impact on local elections this election season. So one of the best things about elections is all the creativity and humor that artists use to express their perspective and opinions about the democratic process. So artists like Berryman and Bob Englehart, they use their skills and wit to take snapshots of the public's thoughts and feelings about whatever is happening during an election process, right? And then people, decades and decades after the drawing is made, can take a look at those cartoons and see, look into the public's mind and opinions about whatever was happening. So we are very lucky to have a local cartoonist of national renown here to talk to us today about their work. So if you have any questions throughout the program, we will have a Q&A session at the very end. So after Bob is done, you can just raise your hand if you have a question. I will come to you with a microphone, so whoever is watching online can also hear the questions and participate in the Q&A. So now, without further ado, I will leave you with Bob. Bob Englehart, originally from Fort Wayne, Indiana, was the first full-time editorial cartoonist for America's oldest continuously published newspaper, the Hartford Courant. He joined the paper in 1980 and worked there until 2015. He attended Chicago's American Academy of Art, and Bob drew art and illustrations for the Chicago Today. In 1972, while working as an independent commercial artist, he began his editorial cartoon career by drawing freelance for the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. His first full-time position came in 1975 at the Dayton Journal-Herald, and for 4 years after that, he was the Pulitzer Prize finalist in the editorial cartoon category. Englehart is the author of 2 collections of his editorial cartoons and a memoir entitled Track Rat, Memoir of a Fan, and which continues to be reprinted in books, textbooks, and periodicals. His editorial cartoons are included in collections in the Connecticut Historical Society, the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library in Ohio, State University, the News Museum in Washington, D.C., Eastern Connecticut State University, the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center at the University of Connecticut, and Indiana Purdue University of Fort Wayne. His work has also been the subject of many major solo exhibits, including at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, and today he is a freelance cartoonist with a large online following. And now, without further ado, I leave you with Bob Englehart.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming out in this horrible, horrible weather. This is one way to spend a Saturday afternoon. At least we're dry. I would encourage you to go see the exhibit if you haven't seen the exhibit. And I want to explain a couple things about the exhibit. This is the work of Berryman, of course. You've seen these etchings in Harper's Weekly and Frank Leslie's Illustrated News and all those old periodicals. Those were done by engravers. The cartoonist would draw a drawing on a piece of wood, and then he would hand that piece of wood to an engraver, and the engraver would dig out the lines on a block of like boxwood. It's boxwood I've never heard of before, but it's supposed to be very hard. But what we have in the exhibit here is pen and ink. It's not etchings, because in about 1890, the photo engraving, the photo reproduction camera took over and kind of eliminated a bunch of jobs. It was the technology of its time. And now the cartoonist could draw in ink and put it on the camera that would take a shot, take a picture of it, and put it in the newspaper. So that put a bunch of engravers out of work. It's a familiar theme in newspapers. But let's take a look at these cartoons. Berryman was credited with creating the teddy bear. And the story is that Theodore Roosevelt was hunting in the Adirondacks, and he was bear hunting. They didn't find any bears, so one of the people in the hunt captured a baby cub and pulled it into camp and said, "Go ahead, shoot it." Of course, Roosevelt said, "No, I'm not going to do that." Well, this word got around, and it became a big story in the newspaper, and Berryman did this cartoon. And a toy manufacturer in New York City saw the cartoon and created the teddy bear from it. And then ever since then, the teddy bear was part of Berryman's repertoire. He would work it into his cartoons anywhere he could. The caption down at the bottom and written in pencil is the "to be's or not to be's." This is about running for re-election for a third term. Back in those days, you could run for re-election for a third term. And you'll notice that when you look at the exhibit, you'll notice that the more things change, the more they stay the same. The same problems: Congress, greedy people, power-mad people. Same here with Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is good old Uncle Sam. Editorial Cartoonists would be lost without Uncle Sam. Votes for women. At one time, the tiger was the mascot of the Democratic Party. This is almost like a Mad Magazine thing, well, how they're reacting and how they feel. So I have a few cartoons that I brought, and I'm going to show them in a moment. I wanted to explain that I'm now available on Patreon. Patreon is Editorial Cartoons. We're trying to figure out a way to make a living without newspapers. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it's a fun experiment. And we're trying everything we can. And one of the things we're trying is patreon.com. You can become a subscriber to www.patreon.com/Englehart and get 3 of my cartoons a week. Brand new stuff. I've done a bunch of I put this slideshow together about 2 weeks ago so that Mariana would have a chance to do a good job on it. And a lot has happened in those 2 weeks. I don't have any cartoons about the war that I brought with me today, but they're on patreon.com/Englehart. So check it out. Subscribe. Here's a cartoon I did. This is the recent stuff, the first political party with the heart of a pig, and it's how I draw Donald Trump. Now, some of you may like Donald Trump, and that's fine. I don't. I have a new book, How to Start a Civil War. Notice that I'm not drawing it quite like Berryman. Berryman, he drew cartoons at a time when people had a lot of time on their hands and they could spend an afternoon reading the newspaper. And his cartoons were drawn very large, and readers could study his cartoons because they had the time to do it. His cartoons had to look good on a newspaper page. My cartoons just have to look good on a phone. Another Trump cartoon, The Rule of Law. This is happening now, even as we speak. This is before the invasion of Ukraine. Don't make me come back there. poke, poke, poke. This was my first caricature of Joe Biden, and I have since drawn several other caricatures, of course. And my caricatures evolve. They start out a certain way, and then as I get to know the person, they evolve, and they get more bizarre in most cases. First black woman in the Supreme Court knocking down the door of history. Not just knocking at history's door, but flattening it. Now here's there's a thing that the Republicans are doing and some conservatives are doing. If they don't like anybody, they call them a pedophile. Now, I don't get that. Why would they pick that one thing? So I'm thinking that some of these Republicans, many of these Republicans may be victims of pedophilia. I don't know. I think the people that follow Trump in the main are victims. They feel like they're victims, and Trump speaks to that. So I'm just trying to make sense of it myself. When I draw a cartoon, usually I'm trying to make sense of the issue. This is Kim Jong-un visiting Putin, will invade for arms. These are perilous times we live in. Insurrection by other means, government shutdown, and Biden impeachment. This Republican Congress is crazy. It's just plain crazy. My wife gave me this cartoon idea. What will we do when Trump is gone? Breathe. My wife gives me cartoon ideas fairly regularly, and I'll draw them because I don't want to work. I mean, I'm supposed to have fun. Soon self-driving cars won't even need you to be in them. Go pick up a pizza. I'm thinking that self-driving cars would probably do a lot to eliminate accidents, or at least a lot of accidents. Will you marry me? Instead of a diamond ring, he's giving a gallon of gas. Now, I'm syndicated by a group called cartoonist.com. And this cartoon is the most popular cartoon I've done for cartoonist.com. Here's another idea that my wife gave me. Actually, I should probably get my wife up here to talk. Welcome to Florida. The sun makes you stupid. She gave me that idea, and I turned it into a postcard, which I have sent to people. I have friends in Florida, too. Now we're going back into history, the history of my editorial cartoons. This is the first editorial cartoon I ever had published. I was working for the Chicago Today, which was, at the time was called Chicago American, in Chicago. And I was in the art department, and I thought maybe I'd like to do an editorial cartoon. So I asked the art director if I could do an editorial cartoon. He asked the editor said, sure, go ahead, if we like it. I had no idea what I was going to do, and there was a big scandal at the time, a news story about they found a Ku Klux Klan cell in the Chicago Police Department. So that was pretty, intense, and it was rocking the city. And I was walking across the bridge on Michigan Avenue, and a big gust of wind came along and blew up this woman's dress in front of me. And I had this idea for an editorial cartoon. And I thought, maybe I should be an editorial cartoonist. So I drew this, called it The Windy City, and it ran down on the editorial page of the Chicago American. And that got me started. This is the cartoon that kind of put me on the map in Hartford. This was the Northeast Utilities, while asking for a rate hike that would allow the highest profit level in the nation, unveils a new logo. Screw you. Their logo used to be a block like that with an N, an NU. And I drew this cartoon, and it got an interesting reaction. About half the people went crazy and said, how can you do this to this venerable old newspaper? This is so obscene. The other half of the people said, finally, that old newspaper's woken up. This is Governor William A. O'Neill hated the caricature I did of him. Most of the politicians I draw have a sense of humor about what I do, even when I'm making fun of them. O'Neill did not. He didn't like it. His wife liked it. I found that out later. She thought it was funny. We're going to make sure you have affordable housing. Here's a bus ticket to Maine. I was invited to be a surprise guest at a roast they were doing of William O'Neill. This was right after he was governor. And they brought me out from the stage, and I drew it, and they had an easel set up, and I drew his picture, his caricature, the way I drew it. And he said, "Do you mind if I draw you?" I said, "No, go right ahead." So he drew this kind of a crude drawing that I think was supposed to be a butt. And I laughed. I said, "Will you sign it?" And he signed it. And I said, "Can I have it?" And he gave it to me. We had it framed and hung it in the Hartford Courant for years. I'm not sure where that is today, as a matter of fact. Good old Teenage Mutant Ninja Wiker. What do you get? What candidate do you get when you mix Republicans, Democrats, and Independents? Teenage Mutant Ninja Wiker. He had a sense of humor about my cartoons, my caricature I drew him. But I did draw a cartoon once that really pissed him off. And he called me. And he said, "God damn it, Englehart, that goes against everything I stand for as a politician in 40 years. And I said, "Well, we're not on the same side of this issue, so thank you for calling." And I hung up. But it was a cartoon I did about, I called it Hooverville. Remember in the Depression there was Hooverville, people made tents, and they put their tents in Washington, D.C. in protest for the stock market crash and all that. And it's called Hooverville. Well, we were having a bad recession at the time, so I made a tent in the yard in front of the old state house, or the new state house, and called it Wikerville, and he didn't find that to be anywhere funny. Finally, an income tax. Let us all join hands. Now, I have to explain that I was in favor of an income tax. I came from income tax states, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. And when we came here, when my family moved here, they were very proud that we don't have an income tax, but everything was taxed. Everything that moved, everything that didn't move, and some very high rates. And I thought it would just be more fair and easier if they just make an income tax. I was in a minority on that opinion, apparently, but it got passed. In this cartoon, Wiker's running against Eunice Rourke, and he was using her policies and her ideas and kind of rebranding them as his own. So I put him in her clothes. "Hello, I'm Eunice Rourke, and I'm running for governor." Now, it's fun to draw any man in women's clothes in a cartoon because it always gets a laugh. John Rowland. "Honey, can you turn it down? It's getting really hot." Nora Dennehy is now on the Supreme Court, and she was the prosecutor who noticed that Rowland was living pretty high on the hog for his $70,000 a year salary, and that's all the governor was getting at the time, $70,000 a year. And so she did a little investigation and found out he was taking favors and money from all kinds of people. which is too bad because we could have. He did a lot for artists. How am I supposed to run an effective misleading campaign? Roland is a rotten fish. Now, after Roland, we got Jody Rell. And Jody Rell was so clean cut in comparison, I drew her as Snow White. Now, don't be grumpy. She sent me a photo of her and her husband at Halloween. She was dressed as Snow White, and her husband was Prince Valiant, and they're handing out candy to the trick-or-treaters. Interesting to have that kind of influence on the governor. This is the cartoon I did after 9/11. Everybody knows where they were on 9/11. I was at home. I was in my studio. My habit at the time was to get up, have a cup of coffee, look at the newspaper, look at the TV to see if we're at war, and then I'd go up in the studio and start working. And I did that day, and my son called and said, "Are you watching TV?" And I said, "No." And he said, "We're being attacked." So I went downstairs. My wife and I watched TV, and I said, "I got to go to the newspaper." So I left and went to Hartford. We live in Middletown. I left and went to Hartford. And I was filled with different kinds of images, a lot of images of Liberty, Lady Liberty, bent down and crying and sad, and Uncle Sam crying and sad. And I thought, no, I'm not sad, I'm pissed. I'm angry. So I had this idea. And the editor said, we're going to come out with a special edition in 5 minutes. If you can come up with an idea, we'll put it on page 1. And I thought, great, because I had this idea, and I started to draw it, and it just was going to take more than 5 minutes to do this cartoon, so I didn't want to ruin it. So I said, that's all right, I'll take the regular deadline. And so it ran in the next day, September 12th. And this has been on the cover of books, and, you know, I made the right decision. This is another cartoon that got a big response. This is when Jackie Gleason died. And I drew this cartoon, and it got, I think it was like 3,500 responses. 3,500 people wanted to print. And we used it as a fundraiser for Camp Current. So this is by far probably the most popular cartoon I did for the Current. Now, when, what was her name? Audrey Meadows. When Audrey Meadows died, I did this cartoon. I'm home, Ralph. My wife got a phone call one day from Jane Meadows. Do you know who Jane Meadows is? The actress. She was in a lot of TV shows, a lot of panel shows. And she wanted a copy of the cartoon, and she said she'd pay for it. And of course my wife said, no, she's married to Steve Allen. And Steve Allen's one of my heroes growing up. One of the people who formed my sense of humor. So she said, oh no, we don't want money. And she told me this later. I said, are you nuts? They're millionaires. But yeah, we had a nice long conversation with Jane Meadows. And again, the thing about doing editorial cartoons, and probably anything that you do for the public, you put it out there, you never know what the reaction is going to be and who's going to respond and how they're going to respond. This is when Ella Grasso died and O'Neill took over as governor. Mold. I was looking forward to drawing Ella Grasso because she would have been easy to draw. I mean, she just had a look about her that I could draw her in my sleep. And she died before I got here. And she left office, and then she died shortly, actually it was shortly after. I think she died in February. I got here in December. I never got a chance to draw her as governor. Jim Henson. When Jim Henson died, I did this cartoon. I kind of got famous for doing memorial cartoons. I haven't done so many since then because I'm doing 3 cartoons a week and not 5 cartoons a week. When you do 5 cartoons a week, you can get desperate. You can draw just about anything. But I'm trying to get back into it because I like to draw them and people like to see them. A reader, told me once, "I can't cry until I see your cartoon." Oh, okay. Better get to work. Charles Schultz died. Dear Spike, Dad died. Mickey Mantle died. Trade you. Now I got I got an angry phone call from a reader who was very upset with me, who said that I made Mickey Mantle's baseball bigger than God's. And that's another thing about drawing editorial cartoons for the public. You never know what kind of reaction you're going to get, and sometimes they're just off the wall. I put this cartoon. Lowell Weicker died recently, and this cartoon ran in the Hartford Times. Now, you all know the Hartford Times as being a newspaper that went out of business in 1976, I think it was. Well, the Hartford Times is back, and it's back online, and it's being developed into a journalistic enterprise. So I'm going to be drawing two editorial cartoons a month for the Hartford Times, and I'm looking forward to it. And it's taken a while to do all the mechanics and all the things that have to be done that I don't understand. All I understand is drawing editorial cartoons. Dianne Feinstein, first woman mayor of San Francisco, first woman senator from California, first in our hearts, Dianne Feinstein. I used to be a Whalers fan when they were in town, and Paul Maurice was hired to be the coach, and he was the youngest coach in the NHL. So I have got this cop about to pull this kid away, and one of the players is saying, "It's okay, he sits there, officer, he's the coach." So the Whalers leave, and we get the Wolf Pack. All right, men, there's a long ice hockey tradition here in Hartford, but would like you to try to win anyway. And I say that as a Whalers fan. Towards the end, they didn't win too often. I did this cartoon in about 1992, I think. Thoughts while stuck in a traffic jam caused by highway construction. Welcome to Connecticut. State animal, New Jersey barrier. State tree. State mineral, asphalt. State motto, lane closed 500 feet. I could have drawn this yesterday and it'd still be true. And that's another thing about some editorial cartoons. They're called evergreens. They're good forever. Living here as long as I have, I figured out the insurance companies. If you live near the shore and want hurricane coverage, you'll have to buy hurricane shutters. That way, we can maintain our business model. Whatever it is, if you can buy insurance against it at a reasonable price, it's not going to happen to you. Here we have the Pequot Indian in full battle dress. I drew this in response to the new tribal situation with casinos, and it also we kind of got reintroduced to Indians. And I say Indians because I talked to an Indian once who told me, we were in Ticonderoga, Fort Ticonderoga in upstate New York. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but they dress in full period costume. And there was an Indian standing there. He's all dressed in, he was Abenaki tribe, I think he was from. And so I said to him, what Native American tribe are you from? And he said, where were you born? And I said, Indiana. He said, you're a Native American. I said, okay, what do you want me to call you? He said, call me an Indian. It's from the Spanish, it means Indio. And that's what the Spanish called every native that they met in every country they went to. So I thought, okay, I've been given license, I can say Indian. Waterbury absentee voter on board. Waterbury used to be the most corrupt city in Connecticut, but I think that's been surpassed now by Bridgeport. Financial Disclosure Day. I have to explain that this cartoon was never published. And it's because it's a rough. When I would draw an editorial cartoon, I would have to make a quick drawing to show my editor, to give him an idea of where I'm going, what I'm going to do. And once in a while, I'd like to do a drawing that would just freak him out. So when anybody's running for governor, they have Financial Disclosure Day, where they have to reveal their source of income and how much money they made last year. And Morrison and Rowland, who were running, said they would do it. But Weicker said, no, I'm not going to do it. It's another one that never saw the light of day, Clarence Thomas. He's been in trouble since the beginning. This is nothing new with Clarence Thomas. But again, this didn't run. A lot of times I would show a cartoon to the editor like this, and he would say, come back when you're serious. I like to keep them off balance. Ronald Reagan. I had two caricatures of Ronald Reagan. One was not very flattering, and one was flattering. This is the not very flattering one. Reagan says, Michael. Well, they made a big deal out of Michael Jordan. Michael what? Yes, and meeting Reagan. Michael, in the past 3 years, I've done a lot for your people. My people? Yeah, millionaires. Joe Lieberman. If you want the state of Connecticut to join in the antitrust suits against the insurance companies, let me get back to you. So he sent me a letter that said, my religion forbids that I sleep with animals. Now, he had a sense of humor about how I drew him and what I said about him, which was good to do, good to know. I will not be a candidate for Susan, will you wait a minute? This is a cartoon about Susan Bicelith, who is a very ambitious and determined public servant. And I hope and now she's lieutenant governor. I hope she gets to be governor someday. I think she's very good. I think she's dedicated. But she's impatient. Thurman Milner was the first black man elected mayor anywhere in New England. And so I did this cartoon. And it's kind of a joke because the mayoral office in Hartford at the time was not powerful at all. It was just a kind of a show place, you know, just a title. You really didn't have any power. When does life begin? Well, the priest says at the moment of conception. Judge says at birth. Kid says when you get your driver's license. Now the kid was my son at the time, who was about 13 years old, 14, around there. But this was the subject of a plagiarism suit. One of my readers from Hartford was visiting in Texas and saw this and realized that I'd already drawn this cartoon like a month before, or 6 months before, or whatever, but he had seen it and sent it to me. And so I took it to my editor, and the cartoonist that stole it had a long reputation of being a thief. That he took a lot of cartoons that nobody ever did anything about, and they let him get away with it. And I wasn't going to do that. So my editor talked to his editor, and he wound up getting fired. Because that's plagiarism, and it can't be rewarded, and it can't be glossed over. The Patriot Act came about after 9/11, which was going to give the government access to library records of what people check out of the library. And Connecticut librarians fought against it. Careful, they're not just any librarians, they're Connecticut librarians. And this is finally the last cartoon. There was a story about how coyotes were coming back to Connecticut. And they've been out in the West for a long time, and out in Arizona, they went yip, yip, yahoo! But the eastern coyote from Connecticut says, excellent moon. That's it. Anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. That was so cool. All right, so if anybody has any questions, please just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over to you.
So what's your favorite cartoon of all time, the one that you've done?
Favorite cartoon of all time?
All time.
I don't know. I don't have one favorite. I usually like the one I just drew until I look at it and then I think, oh, I could have done better. But that's the curse of a cartoonist. No, I don't have any one favorite.
You mentioned the Jackie Gleason one being the most popular ever.
Yeah.
Did your current cartoons get syndicated nationally?
Yes, to the same people that syndicate me now. So I've been with them for about 20 years. I left the Current in 2015. I've been, interesting story. We had an event at the Historical Society, and I was celebrating 35 years at the Hartford Courant, and I had an exhibit of 35 cartoons and a get-together, and and the next day, that night, the editor said, I want to see you first thing in my office in the morning. Okay. Well, we'd been given a buyout offer. And it was about the third or fourth buyout offer that had come down the pike, and I'd put them all in the shredder. I wasn't taking a buyout. But we had a meeting in his office, and he said, I've seen the numbers, they're not good. We're the only newspaper our size with an editorial cartoonist in the chain. I think they're going to eliminate your job in the next quarter. I would advise you to take the buyout. And I said, where do I sign? So that's when I left. But I'd been syndicated, and I continued to be syndicated with the same people. And there's been so many cartoonists now that are out that have been eliminated, jobs eliminated. The McClatchy chain just eliminated all editorial cartoons.
In the history of editorial cartoon, when did it start? What, where?
Well, I can't hear you.
When did editorial cartoons begin in American
Well,
history?
Ben Franklin is credited with being the first editorial cartoonist. The snake that's cut into pieces, remember that one? Unite or Die. That's generally considered to be the first American editorial cartoonist. Before that, there were cartoonists Cruikshank in Europe and others. going back into the 1600s. So it has evolved over time.
Any other questions?
So my apologies if you've already covered this, but do you have any advice for whether technical or professional for aspiring cartoonists?
An aspiring editorial cartoonist? Well, I would say do it. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. Now, as far as getting a job goes, I don't know. It's going to be tough to find a job for a newspaper. But you might be able to find a job as on an online newspaper. But cartooning in general has changed, and the hot market now is books, graphic novels, very popular, and children's books. I mean, I've never thought of myself as a children's book cartoonist, but if I was new coming up, I'd consider it if I wanted to draw cartoons.
Thank you.
Anybody else? And also, for all of our audience online, do feel free to post your questions in the comments section.
I was going to ask to follow up on that about social media, using social media as a platform for your art.
You can do that, but it's very hard to get paid in social media. Most people doing things for social media are doing it for free. And I suppose if push comes to shove, I'm going to. I mean, we used to joke, cartoonists, we used to joke about, boy, it's great to get paid for doing something we would do for free. Well, it's kind of getting to that way. And it's not a joke anymore. But I don't know, I have to do it, because if I don't, I'll go nuts. And I'm already nuts. I'll just go nuttier.
Anybody else? I have a question. So we talked about the past with Clifford Berryman and even Franklin, and now the present with yourself. What do you think is the future of cartoons? You mentioned that it has evolved. How much else do you foresee that it will continue to evolve?
Well, the future of editorial cartoons is, I think, the very large papers will continue to have editorial cartoonists. It's going to be up to the editorial cartoonists whether they think they can make a living at it, because the large newspapers, even the large newspapers, have cut back. A lot of them, I think most of these cartoonists are working as freelancers for they're working 5 days a week, but they're working as independent contractors, so the newspaper doesn't have to pay insurance or pension, or, it's all about, it changed back in the, I'm going to say back in the 80s, big time, when newspapers went on to Wall Street. When newspapers went to Wall Street and became Wall Street corporations, they used to say, profit is not a dirty word. Well, it is a dirty word if you're going to get rid of all the journalists, get rid of the editorial cartoonists, get rid of the photographers, because the fewer people you have, the more money you make, because people cost money, but people make journalism. So I don't know where that's going to go. I don't. But I'm 70. I'm going to be 78 years old. I don't have to worry too much. My problems will be solved soon enough. Well, I have to laugh about it because it's funny.
I don't see any questions coming in from online, but I do have one more.
Okay.
So just wondering if you have any thoughts on using cartoons, particularly historical cartoons, as, mediums for research, for any students that have to do projects, history projects, or anything like that. What are your thoughts of using cartoons as part of your research?
Researchers love to use editorial cartoons because they explain a complicated issue very simply, and they can enlighten people and open up people's minds. I've given all my papers to UConn, to the Dodd Library at UConn, And by papers, I mean editorial cartoons, illustrations, things I've written for the Hartford Courant, and things that I've done on my own now since then. And yes, it's a great way to do research. And it's kind of a fun way to do research. Anybody who likes to do research, so a lot of people like to spend a lot of time reading and reading and reading, but if you can get a laugh out of your reading, that's cool too.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bob. I'd like to thank you so much for coming today and having this conversation with us. Thank you, everybody else, for coming, despite the rain, despite the weather. I hope you enjoyed today's program. And Bob, I hope you enjoyed giving today's program.
Thank you.
So if you haven't, again, please do check out the exhibit right across the hall. And we do have a couple of other programs coming up here at Connecticut Salt State House. We do have our election cake bake-off. That is on November the 4th. If you have a sweet tooth, want to check out some cool election cakes, that's coming down. And also on November 11th, we are going to have a caricature drawing workshop here. That's a Saturday at 1 p.m., 2 p.m., I believe. So yeah, do check out our Facebook page for more information about all those upcoming programs, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and have a good weekend.
Thank you. Thank you very much.